All right, welcome to the PHLY Sixers show, brought to you as always by our good friends over at Rothman Orthopedics. Earlier this week, there was a report coming out from Clutch Points about some of the pessimism around the league about Joel Embiid and the status of his knee. Per Clutch Points, the common word associated with Embiid and his health this offseason is that things are bad. Several rival teams in the Eastern Conference who spoke with Clutch Points a couple of weeks ago at Summer League confirmed mixed signals coming from the Sixers regarding Embiid's knee health, with one executive stating that the Sixers are already regretting their decision to extend the big man's contract in 2024. He also goes on to say that another source stated that the surgeries and countless rehab efforts have taken a toll on Embiid mentally, which we know because he opened up to ESPN not that long ago. Clutch Points also goes on to then say that when you have a second surgery to attempt to fix the initial problem, and then you continue to deal with delays and more complications, that's never a good sign. Now, obviously, this has sent, I think, a lot of Sixers fans into a minor state of panic.
Talked about a little bit over the past few days.
So I guess, what was your initial impression of the report and what we learned from it?
The initial reaction to the report is that people around the NBA are pessimistic about Joel Embiid's knee and join the club.
Yeah. No, I guess my initial impression is, first of all, I don't necessarily really care. Like, it's not an update. You're not really getting an update when you're talking to people who haven't seen the medical reports.
100%.
So are what they saying was wrong? No,
Maybe not.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I am optimistic about Joel Embiid's knee heading into the season. I think what I'll mostly say is that my stance hasn't really been changed by anything that we're hearing. We all know that when you're sitting here and you have to get a second surgery, what was a second surgery? Like 9 months after the previous, or much more than that, actually, a year after the previous one, that's not an optimal place to be. We all know that when he had that many setbacks last year, that's not great. And we all know how those injuries have taken a toll on him mentally, because he has told you time and time again that this has been the toughest injury to come back from a mental perspective. So I just fundamentally don't think that we learned all that much out of this article. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't, it's not newsworthy. It just means I think you have to put it in the proper context a little bit. It is a bunch of people around other teams who haven't had access to either the player or the medical reports, basically just talking like, you're at a barber shop talking about basketball. Look, we get it. You need meniscus to play high level basketball. A lack of meniscus is always going to be concerning. We just haven't really learned anything new.
Let's talk about some of that context, because in that ESPN article a couple of weeks ago, here's what Joel Embiid was quoted as saying. And this was from Doton Akintoye, I think is how you say it. If I screwed that up, I'm sorry, but it was a great article. And he basically said, when Embiid and I spoke for the final time in late June, he tells me how he's making some changes this offseason. Quote, "We're not going to push anything," Joel says. "For my whole career, I felt like we never took that approach," end quote. Doughton then notes that a week before, Daryl Morey said he was hopeful that Embiid would be back in time for training camp in September. But then Joel, a little bit of a rebuttal by saying, quote, "We don't have a timeline, hopefully sooner rather than later." And then this is kind of the key quote to me. After being asked if the organization supports his new patient approach, Joel says, quote, "I don't know how they feel. The only thing I'd say is this is a business. It's all about the results. If I come back early enough and I'm still not myself, guess what? You're not winning any games." End quote. Gotta say, nailed that, Joe. You're 100% right there. One of the things that piqued my interest in this article, but also comes through in those quotes, is that I just wonder what Joel's relationship is like with the team. You mentioned that a lot of the earlier article was about outside opinions of Joel Embiid. I just wonder if there are a lot of essentially outside opinions coming from within the Sixers organization, because there's not a high level of trust there.
Right.
There's not a good working relationship. And I do think that at some point, if this thing is ever going to get back on track, there's got to be a level of trust from Joel and at least some people in this organization.
Yeah. No, and it really is. Like, I think this is one of the many instances where the frustration of, the knee and the knee just not responding to the surgery he had last year the way that he expected, not being reliable, not really finding the right treatment path or plan to get him back on the court with any kind of regularity, and him just not feeling like himself. He mentioned in that ESPN article now a lot where like the trust issues come from. And early on in his career, when he had that issue with his foot and people didn't necessarily believe him, and he felt like he had to really, he wasn't really being heard the way he wanted to. And trust issues just coming from moving to America, coming to a completely new environment. You wonder if there's, now that things aren't going well, because for the most part, when he has had injuries in the past, he has gotten a surgery's corrected it, and he's come back. And this is the first time
Come back and killed it.
This is the first time outside of that need for that second foot surgery. This is the first time that really hasn't happened. And you wonder if maybe those coping strategies that he had, or the lack of trust that's maybe inherent in him or that he has had in the past, you do wonder if that is coming back up in some ways. Not even necessarily if the Sixers are doing anything wrong, just because you are frustrated with the outcome. This is a player whose career is potentially being derailed by injuries. Even if nobody is doing anything wrong, you can be wildly frustrated at where you are and looking for any kind of a hope to get you out of that spot. And look, is this latest surgery going to fix every ailment he has? I think that would be a very, very optimistic take on what's going on. But at this point, you have to try something, because the player we saw last year, even in the limited, 19 games that he played, just was nowhere near the player that we previously saw. He understands that. He knows his body better than anybody else. And he's looking for a way to get back to where he was. And I don't necessarily, even if he is frustrated, I don't blame him at all for that.
Throughout his career, it's been pretty apparent to me, at least, that he does not like being the injured guy, because he starts his career by not playing 2 seasons at all. And if you remember, in the 2016-17 season, they put him on quite a minutes restriction. He wasn't playing back-to-backs, and he didn't like that. And I don't think he didn't like that because he was a competitor, but he didn't like the idea of, oh man, we need to handle this guy with care. And he's always pushed through the injuries throughout his career. The difference between this one and those past injuries is that when he came back this time, he was not the same level of player. So now we're seeing mistrust between him and the organization, and really a different tact from him in terms of not pushing through this injury. I mean, this was described as a surgery that would only take, a couple of months at most to return from. We still don't really have a definitive timeline. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I guess my main takeaway from this, Derek, is, do I feel great about the state of Joel's knee and the idea that he can get back to being an MVP level player, which I really hope we do see, not in part because we have a Sixers podcast and we talk about these guys every day. No, I don't. But because of these recent updates, do I feel worse about the whole situation? Nah, not really.
No, I feel pretty much the exact same. And part of that is because I think we all, people who have been watching the show every day, in the chat, talking Sixers basketball, we all understand that there's at best a ton of uncertainty, at worst just a lack of hope from a lot of people that watch this team and follow this team and stake probably too much of their emotional health on this team. We all understand that there's just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of ways this could go sideways. So no, I agree with you. I'm not changed by the report. It's just a reminder of, they've got to get some luck here if they really want to turn this around.
But man, wouldn't it be awesome if they got that
great
luck?
Story? But unfortunately, that's not the way that that Philadelphia gods have given us here.
What if this is the one time? 35 points per game in October. We're back, baby.
Would be great to see. All right. Until next time, thank you, Rich, for jumping on. And of course, subscribe, because we are here Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, bringing you Sixers content.